Hey there. Ready for some serious history?
Always.
Okay. So, we're going back to the early 1800s,
Okay.
to the heart of the Cherokee Nation's struggle to protect their land
Right.
and their way of life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, picture this. High stakes courtroom battles,
Wow.
political maneuvering,
Oh, yeah.
and a clash of cultures
I like it.
that still has an impact today.
For sure.
Our main guide for this deep dive
Wow.
is an episode of American History Tellers.
Great source.
And let me tell you, this story is
Yeah.
way more than just dates and names.
It always is, right?
It makes you think about the weight of treaties,
Uh-huh.
the real power of the law,
Mm-hmm.
and what we really mean when we talk about progress.
Big questions.
Trust me,
Yeah.
this is a deep dive you won't forget.
I'm ready.
So, something that really struck me
Okay.
is this. We often have this image
Yeah.
of Native American tribes as
Mhm.
scattered and struggling to adapt.
Right.
But the Cherokee Nation at this time was anything but.
Totally.
They had a sophisticated society,
They did.
a written language,
Yeah.
their own capital city, Nuakota,
Wow.
a newspaper
Hmm.
called the Cherokee Phoenix,
Really?
and even a constitution.
That's amazing.
They were modernizing,
It's true.
thriving,
Yeah.
and ready to stand their ground.
They were.
It's fascinating how they were forging their own path.
I know.
And then, boom, you have the United States
Yeah.
going through major growing pains with
Right.
westward
Of
expansion.
course.
And guess whose land everyone's eyeing?
Oh, I know this one.
The Cherokee Nation, of course.
Makes sense.
Then to make matters worse,
Oh.
gold is
Far
discovered
away.
on their territory.
Oh, man.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Seriously.
I mean, how do you even begin to navigate that?
Well, it definitely creates a
Yeah.
pressure cooker situation.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have these competing interests. And rarely do those competing interests
Yeah.
lead to peaceful resolutions.
Right.
That's what sets the stage for
Yeah.
this really complex
Mhm.
and frankly tragic chapter in American history.
Okay, so let's talk about Elias Boudinot.
Guy?
This guy
Hmm?
was a mixed-race Cherokee
Okay.
who walked a really complicated line.
Not bad.
Imagine growing up in that time,
Oh, yeah.
straddling two worlds.
Right.
He was educated in the North,
Yeah.
exposed to all these different ideas, and he became a strong advocate
Mhm.
for assimilation.
Interesting.
He thought,
Okay.
if we can prove to
Yeah.
white society how advanced we are,
Mhm.
maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
we can survive.
Wow.
He even founded the Cherokee Phoenix to advocate for the Cherokee Nation's sovereignty.
That's wild.
I'm sensing some inner conflict
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember,
Yes.
this is a man who believed deeply in his people,
Mm-hmm.
but also saw the very real threat they faced.
Right.
He was trying to find a way forward, a way to reconcile these
Mhm.
two seemingly opposing forces.
Yeah.
One of quotes
Okay.
really captures this internal struggle.
Okay.
I am not as my fathers were.
Wow.
Broader means and nobler influences
Mhm.
has fallen over me.
That's heavy.
It makes you wonder what he thought his fathers
Hmm.
would make of his choices.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum,
Yeah.
you have John Ross,
Right.
who was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation.
Uh-huh.
He was a veteran
Oh.
and a leader
Hmm.
who believed in holding on to their land,
Yeah.
upholding the treaties
Okay.
they'd signed with the U.S. government.
Right.
He was all about peaceful negotiation.
Got it.
But was that even an option?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
that-
you have to consider the historical context.
Right.
Ross represents that
Yeah.
age-old fight for land and inherent rights.
Mm-hmm.
But he was up against some major forces.
Oh, yeah.
The state of Georgia was determined
Ah.
to take their land.
Right.
And then you have President Andrew Jackson,
Oh, boy.
who was, shall we say,
Yeah.
not exactly known for his sensitivity towards Native Americans.
Not exactly known for his sensitivity, is putting it mildly.
It is.
Jackson was all about
Yeah.
pushing Native Americans out,
Well,
no question.
Totally.
So with all
Bothered
this
him.
pressure mounting,
Yeah.
the Cherokee Nation decides
That's
to
right.
fight back on the legal front.
Interesting.
They hire William Wirt,
Okay.
who was not only a prominent lawyer,
Right.
but get this, the recently fired Attorney General,
What?
like Andrew Jackson.
No way.
Now that's throwing down the gauntlet.
That's a statement.
What was Wirt's strategy going into this?
Well, Wirt knew that
Okay.
to have a chance, he
Mhm.
needed a case built on
Right.
solid legal ground.
Okay.
But there was this huge obstacle.
What's that?
conflicting treaties.
Oh, no.
The U.S. had promised to protect Cherokee land,
Right?
but they'd also promised to help Georgia acquire Native American territory.
It was a legal and political mess.
Absolutely.
Talk about a catch-22.
Really?
So we're realizing he needs some serious legal firepower,
Okay.
writes to the big man himself,
Who's that?
Chief Justice John Marshall,
Oh, wow.
almost as if to say,
Yeah.
hey, what do you think about all this?
Interesting.
Now, Marshall writes back,
Okay.
and he seems sympathetic to
Mhm.
the Cherokee's plight,
Yeah.
but is pretty vague on the legal strategy.
Mhm.
He basically says, you need the right kind of case, something the court can really work with.
Interesting.
What do you make of Marshall's response?
It definitely makes you wonder.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
If the highest court in the land
Mhm.
is hesitant to wade into
Yeah.
such a politically charged situation,
Right.
what hope does that give the Cherokee?
It's tough.
It speaks volumes about the limits of the law,
Yeah.
especially when you're going up against
Yeah.
deeply entrenched power structures.
It does. It really does feel like a David and Goliath situation.
Totally.
So what happens next?
Well,
Does Wirt find that right kind of case
he does.
that Marshall was talking about?
He does, and it comes
yeah.
in a rather unexpected way.
Oh, so.
The first case Wirt brings
Okay.
before the Supreme Court
Mm-hmm.
is Cherokee Nation v. Georgia
Okay.
in 1831.
All right.
Their argument hinges on
Okay.
challenging Georgia's right
Okay.
to exert legal authority over Cherokee territory.
So, like, their laws don't apply there.
Exactly.
Got it.
They used a murder trial as their example, hoping to establish a clear conflict
Yeah.
between Georgia's laws and Cherokee sovereignty.
Interesting.
So they're not going after the big picture
Right.
of land ownership just yet.
Okay.
They're focusing on very specific instance of legal jurisdiction.
Smart.
Exactly.
Narrowing it down to one specific thing.
It's a strategic move.
Yeah.
Narrowing the focus
Yeah.
to a tangible issue.
Got it.
But Marshall's ruling in this case
Okay.
is a bit of a head scratcher.
So.
While he seems to recognize
Mm-hmm.
the unique situation of the Cherokee,
Okay.
he ultimately denies
Oh, wow.
the court's jurisdiction.
So they said, we can't even hear this.
They can't even hear the case.
Oh, man.
And to make things even more confusing, he creates this new category,
Okay.
calling the Cherokee a domestic dependent nation.
I have to admit that term is throwing me for a loop.
What?
It's like they're caught in this weird legal limbo.
Totally.
Not quite a sovereign nation,
Right.
but not just a group of citizens under Georgia's control either.
It's this weird in-between.
Yeah, what are the implications of that?
That's the key question.
Domestic dependent nation label.
And unfortunately, it didn't offer much clarity
Oh, man.
at the time.
Okay.
It was like Marshall was acknowledging
Yeah.
the complex relationship between the Cherokee Nation and the U.S. government
Okay.
without fully granting them the independence they were fighting for.
Right.
It was a setback for sure. But Marshall did hint in his ruling
Okay.
that a different type of case,
Interesting.
one with a white plaintiff
Hmm.
challenging Georgia's laws,
Okay.
might have a better chance of success.
So he basically gave Wirt a roadmap,
Exactly.
even if he couldn't deliver a win.
Yeah, like a little hint.
In that particular case,
Right.
that's some serious legal maneuvering.
It is.
So did Wirt take the hint
He did.
and find this ideal case with a white plaintiff?
He did, and it became known as Worcester v. Georgia in 1832.
Okay.
This time, Wirt gets really creative
Oh, okay.
with his strategy. Enter Samuel Worcester,
Okay.
a missionary, who was a fierce advocate for Cherokee independence.
Okay.
He was living on Cherokee land
Right.
without a license,
Okay.
which, remember, was against Georgia law
right.
at the time.
Okay, I'm seeing where this is going.
Yeah.
Georgia had passed laws
Yep.
specifically to limit white presence in Cherokee territory.
Exactly.
So Wirt is using their own laws against them.
Totally.
But how does a missionary
Well, Worcester was
end up at the center of this legal battle?
deeply embedded in
Oh.
Cherokee life.
Mm-hmm.
He helped establish the Cherokee Phoenix,
Really?
served as their postmaster,
Mm-hmm.
and truly believed in their right
Wow.
to govern themselves.
That's amazing.
He, along with another missionary named Eliza Butler
Okay.
and several others,
Uh-huh.
purposely got themselves arrested
Wow.
to challenge these laws.
Talk about putting yourself on the line
And,
for
hey,
what you believe in.
They knew the risks,
Yeah.
but they were determined
Okay.
to create this ideal case
Yeah.
that Marshall had alluded to.
So they use themselves as bait, exactly, to
Yeah.
force the Supreme Court to address this conflict head on.
Yep.
Risky, but brilliant.
It was.
So what happened?
Well,
Did the court take the bait?
they did.
They did.
And this time,
Okay.
the ruling was a major victory for the Cherokee.
Finally.
Marshall basically told Georgia,
Yeah.
you can't make laws
Right.
that violate federal treaties
Uh-huh.
and the Constitution.
Yeah.
He declared Georgia's laws unconstitutional
Okay.
and affirmed the Cherokee Nation's sovereignty.
Wow. Finally a win for the Cherokee.
It was a huge win.
And I'm guessing there's a but here.
There is.
Did this victory actually change anything on the ground?
Well, you're right to be skeptical.
I mean, Georgia and Jackson weren't
Yeah.
exactly known for backing down.
This is where the story takes another turn.
Uh-oh.
Despite the clear ruling
Okay.
from the highest court in the land,
Yeah.
Georgia flat out ignored it.
Wait, what?
They refuse to release Wester and Butler from prison.
No way. So the state defies the Supreme Court.
They do. And to add insult to injury,
Okay.
President Jackson basically said,
Yeah.
let Marshall enforce his own ruling.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
So much for the rule of law, right?
I know.
It's a brutal reminder that sometimes
Yeah,
legal victories aren't enough.
that's true.
Especially when you're up against
Right.
powerful people who are determined to get their way.
Yeah, that's the tough reality.
What happened to the Cherokee Nation after this?
Well, they were...
I mean, they won in court, but
Yeah.
it sounds like they lost the war.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They were caught in a heartbreaking situation.
Right.
The law was on their side,
Yeah.
but they didn't have the power to enforce it. And this ordeal created another problem,
What's that?
a rift within the Cherokee Nation itself.
Oh, no.
Boudinot, recognizing that
Yeah.
removal was becoming increasingly likely,
Right.
shifted his stance.
How so?
He believed they needed to negotiate the
Okay.
best possible terms
Yeah.
for their forced relocation.
That makes sense.
This split the Cherokee into two factions.
Okay.
Those who followed Boudinot's lead,
Yeah.
known as the Treaty Party,
Okay.
and those who remained loyal to Ross
Right.
and refused to give up their land.
So this legal battle, while important,
Right.
also exposed
Yeah.
deep divisions within the Cherokee Nation.
Exactly.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
What happens next?
Well,
Does this internal conflict
Yeah.
pave the way for what we know is coming?
right.
The Trail of Tears?
It does, yeah. It's
It really highlights
it's a
the
tough situation.
the impossible choices
Yeah.
they were facing, knowing that the full weight of the U.S. government was against them.
Right.
What options
Yeah.
did they really have?
It was a dire situation.
Yeah.
And tragically, that's when the
Yeah.
Treaty of New Dakota comes into play.
Right.
In 1835,
Okay.
a small faction of the Cherokee,
Mm.
led by Boudinot's cousin John Ridge,
Okay.
signed this treaty.
Okay.
It essentially handed over all Cherokee territory
Wow.
in exchange for money and some vague promises of protection.
Oh, man.
It's important to note
Yeah.
that this treaty was signed
Okay.
without the consent or approval
Oh.
of the Cherokee National Council,
So not everybody agreed to this.
which speaks volumes about
Yeah.
how fractured the nation had become.
So this wasn't even a decision
Yeah.
made by the Cherokee government as a whole.
Whoa.
It was a small group
Right.
under immense pressure
Yeah.
making a deal.
A bad deal.
Yeah, that most of the Cherokee didn't even want.
Didn't want it at all.
That's just adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
The Treaty of New Dakota is incredibly controversial.
It-
It highlights how power imbalances
Right.
can be exploited
yeah.
even when there's a clear legal precedent.
Yeah. Even with that win in the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
it essentially rendered their victory in Worcester v. Georgia
Right.
meaningless.
And of course, the result of this
Yes.
forced treaty is what we know today as the Trail of Tears.
Right. The Trail of Tears.
Despite protests from Ross
Yeah.
and the majority of the Cherokee,
Mhm.
the U.S. Senate ratified the treaty
Right.
and the forced removal began.
It's a sad story.
Thousands died from disease
Right.
exposure
Mm.
and the sheer heartbreak of being torn from their homeland.
It's awful.
It's a stain on American history.
Yeah.
And it all stemmed from this treaty that was
Yeah.
never truly agreed upon.
Totally.
The Trail of Tears is a
Yeah.
stark reminder
Right.
of the human cost
Yeah.
of political ambition and broken promises.
Yeah.
It's a story that continues to resonate,
Uh-huh.
forcing us to confront the darker aspects
Yeah.
of our history.
The bad part.
And, It's not just a historical event.
Right.
The Cherokee Nation,
Yeah.
both those who were forced west
Right.
and those who remained in the east,
Mhm.
continued to fight for their rights,
Yeah.
for their culture, for
Me
their
too.
very survival.
We did.
The impact of these events
That's true.
is still felt today.
That's such an important point.
It is.
This isn't just about
Yeah.
something that happened in the past.
Right.
The legacy of the Cherokee cases
Yeah.
and the Trail of Tears
Mm.
continues to shape discussions
Okay.
about Native American sovereignty,
Mhm.
land rights,
Right.
and the ongoing struggle
Yeah.
for self-determination.
It's a story that feels both
I don't know.
incredibly relevant and incredibly distant at the
Got it.
same time.
It's both.
So, for our listener,
So-
someone who might be hearing the story for the first time,
Okay.
what's the key takeaway?
I think the most crucial takeaway
Yeah.
is that this story transcends the specifics
Right.
of a legal battle from nearly 200 years ago.
Right.
It speaks to universal themes of
Okay.
power, justice,
Yeah.
and the fight for self-determination.
Right.
It reminds us
Yeah.
that legal victories,
Mhm.
while important,
Right.
aren't always enough.
That's true.
The fight for what's right,
Yeah.
for basic human rights,
Mm.
is an ongoing process.
It is.
And it requires vigilance,
Yeah.
education,
Right.
and a willingness to challenge those in power.
It also makes you realize
Yeah.
that these historical events,
Uh-huh.
even the ones that seem so far removed
Right.
from our lives,
Mhm.
continue to shape the world we live in today.
For sure.
We have to understand how we got here,
Right.
the complexities of the past,
Yeah.
to navigate the present and the future
Mm-hmm.
with more awareness and hopefully more compassion.
Exactly.
And this story in particular compels us to consider
Right.
whose voices are being heard
Mm-hmm.
and whose stories are being told.
That's important.
It's a reminder to seek out multiple perspectives,
Yeah.
to challenge our own assumptions,
Uh-huh.
and to never take justice for granted.
That's so important.
This has been a heavy
Yeah.
but incredibly important deep dive,
It is.
I have to say.
Yeah.
I'm walking away with a lot to think about,
Yeah, me too.
and I hope our listeners too.
It's one of those stories that stays with you,
It does.
that challenges you to look at the world
Yeah.
with fresh eyes
Mhm.
and to think critically
Right.
about what progress truly means.
Well said.
Thanks.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the
Mhm.
Cherokee cases
Mhm.
and the Trail of Tears.
Mhm.
It's a story filled with tragedy and resilience,
Right.
and it serves as a powerful reminder. It does.
Of the fragility of justice
Yeah.
and the importance of continued vigilance
Right.
in the face of injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time,
Yeah.
keep exploring,
Okay.
keep questioning, and
Mm.
keep learning.
Yeah.